Good day, everybody. It is about a minute before we're going to get started. Go ahead and use the chat feature that you see in GoToMeeting to introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, where you're from, what you do. And if you're not familiar with how the video, or how to pull the comment out of the GoToMeeting, you can just see the GIF that's right here on the screen to learn how to do that. We'll get started in a few minutes. There we go. All right, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be. My name is Michael So. I'm the one of the administrators here at the Inova Translational Medicine Institute for our Nautilus application. Just so that I can hear, that everyone can hear me correctly, we're going to be using this chat feature that is available for GoToMeeting. So if you can hear me, go ahead and type a 1 in that chat, just so that I can understand and know that you guys are out there. For those of you guys who have never attended this meetup before, we do heavily use this chat feature. I use it just so that I can know that you guys can hear me and understand the concepts that are going on. We also use it for polling to see where people might be at in various levels. This meetup isn't like other meetups, and so most meetups are in person, and you can kind of see people's nonverbals to help see if things are getting relayed correctly. So unfortunately, because we can't do that using the internet, except using video, it'd be hard to do that for everyone that's here on the line. Thank you guys all for joining us. Like I said, we're going to use this chat tool quite heavily. So if you haven't already, my recommendation is that you pull it out from the toolbar and lay it somewhere on your screen so you can see the questions that come up. You are welcome to ask questions either directly in the chat window or by using the link that is up here in the description, or I'm sorry, in the slide deck here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and push that over into our GoToMeeting, so that you guys can click on that, copy and paste it, and enter any questions. Again, we'll take questions either in the chat or in that link that we just posted. So again, just feel free to interact with us. This presentation here today is from some feedback that we've gotten from people that attend regularly. They wanted to ask some questions about how people report out of Nautilus. We, of course, do that very heavily here at Inova. And there are some good ways to do it. There's some bad ways to do it. And I think, I don't know if you guys are like us, we're still trying to figure out which one is which. So I asked for some other people to join our panel here. There are a few people that joined or that commented that they would be willing to participate about 2 months ago, but they never got back to me. So right now it's pretty much just me and one of the people that are on my team, which is Rachel Wilson. Rachel is our lab engineer who works with the lab to build features within Nautilus, but also helps on the reporting side. We primarily use Jasper reports and Tableau. So this is going to be a lot of Q&A with Rachel. I'll ask her some questions just to help prime the pump a little bit, and then we'll have questions near the end. And as we're doing this presentation, if you guys have any other topics that you would like this meetup to cover, we meet every other month, so the next time we're going to meet is going to be in June. So if you have any ideas or topics that you would like to see covered, or if you would like to present yourself, please, we will give you guys a link on where you can do that. So Rachel, I have unmuted you. If you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself to the group here, that'd be great.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Wilson. I'm a laboratory informatics engineer over at Inova, and I work under Michael So's, our presenter. So we do, as he said, we do a lot of reporting out of Nautilus, but it's moreover out of the actual database instead of, out of Nautilus itself. I know Nautilus has a reporting tool, I believe it's called InfoMaker, but we haven't really utilized it. Do you want me to continue, or should I have just introduced myself?
No, that sounds great. I'm sure we'll ask you some more questions as we go on. If you would like to provide your input, if you, anyone else here would like to impromptu join our panel here, just send me a quick message in the chat, and I can make sure to include you in our list of questions. So the first topic that we're going to go over is Jasper. These slides are very simple. I didn't spend a ton of time. I just wanted to write a couple of bullet points here and there about what each report does, costs, and things like that, things that administrators might care about. So Jasper reports, there's a couple of different versions. There's a community edition, which is open source and free both as in beer and as in speech. And so it's very, it's relatively well used. There's a lot of support online to at least get some questions answered. So I'll open it up to Rachel here. What has been your overall background or overall level of effort in developing a Jasper report?
So I had never heard of Jasper until I'd actually come to work at Inova. It reminds me of the SSRS reports that I made at a previous job, or that I worked with the developers and to help to create in the previous job. But it does feel like a more rudimentary, you know, you use it to get your text-based graphs, or not graphs, but reports as needed. We haven't really had a need to play with, you know, try and make pretty pictures, because we had a clear vision of, you know, what particular information the user was wanting and how we could report it. And Jasper reports is something that I kind of learned on the fly. Not to get completely off topic, but the same thing has kind of happened with Tableau. But it does what it needs to do to get the job done. The report themselves actually have a separate data set. So each report itself has a data set that it uses that you can pull from any type of database. We just happen to use the Oracle database that Nautilus information goes into, and we pull directly from that database. Now, one interesting feature that I've noticed, or maybe not a feature, but it's kind of a slight irritation with Jasper reports, is that when you're doing tables, if you want to be able to, or at least as I have found, to be able to sort your data, or have your end user be able to sort the data, or filter it or anything, the only way that they can do that is if you make a table and put the data in the table. The issue with that is that you then have to change your, if you have everything set up as one separate query, then you have to change your report data set, because the table data set uses a completely different data set. And it can cause a little bit of confusion.
So it sounds like once you have the data, or once you have a query or a report, it can be difficult to update the report should requirements change.
Updating the reports, it does require having someone having SQL knowledge, or at least as I've found, because it can be a stored procedure that's used to actually generate this report, but we normally use just and not really, well, I guess they would be considered ad hoc queries that we write and we finesse and refine to make certain that it gives our users the data that they're looking for. But yes, if it comes to it where there needs to be a modification, there's no one else that can do it except for me. Like, the end user has no control over, has no ability to go in and make those changes themselves.
Well, I mean, I guess sometimes that's a good and bad thing, right? If a user doesn't know exactly how to run SQL, or doesn't know what, like, for example, column names or things like that, you know, they might get a little bit lost in the weeds. So maybe can you touch on some of the reports that you use Jasper for?
So one of the things that I did when I got here, we had reports that were study specific, and I had to go through and make certain that I can make them study agnostic. So you do have the ability to put parameters in there so that you can have some sort of flexibility. So if somebody wants to see a particular study over another one, that can actually be added in. And that's mainly what I've been creating, letting people know what type of aliquots we've had based off of matrix type, or based off of whether it's a collection device. We show reporting for sample counts. We also show reporting of time outside of we call it our TAT report. So basically, any aliquots that are accessioned after their viability time, or we try to accession them within 90 minutes of getting them. So anything outside of that 90 minutes gets put into that report because it shows whether or not we're getting these samples in on time and, the quality of the samples themselves. So that's another one that we have. We also have another report where it shows how our time of day goes, how many samples we get each hour. So it shows how big the workflow or the workload is for the lab at certain points in the day.
Wow, that report sounds really interesting. I think we can dive deeper there in just a second. But there was something that you mentioned really early on, talking about you made a report that was study specific and then converted into study agnostic. What were some of the steps that you had to take in the report to make that change?
The steps in the report were mainly creating a new parameter so that creating a parameter so that I can link it to an input control, and making certain that the input control that I was using was actually a drop-down list that had all of our studies in it. And then once you have that parameter, you pass that parameter into your stored procedure or your query. For us, it's queries. And you have to, if you try to take one of the queries that we have parameters in and run it in Oracle directly, it's going to give you an error because of how we have to the way that they have it set up of syntax for what's a parameter versus what's actually SQL. But you have to plug it into your SQL query. And I had to, thankfully, the way we had it was study equals. And so just plugging the parameter in there allowed us to be able to change which study they would be able to look at a time and give the user the ability to choose their studies.
Okay. So what about in terms of reliability or speed? Can you speak to that at all?
Jasper's not really all that great for large queries. We had an issue not too long ago where it was trying to pull about 500 rows, and we kept on having issues where the server would end up just dying on us, and we'd have to restart it. And most often we have to restart it twice before it decides that it, wants to come back up and actually give access to our users again. For your like I said, for your basic text charts, to get information out of your data, it's a good tool. It's a free tool. You just have to learn how to put each piece from your toolbox into the right place to make it work. I normally end up using a table so that I can give my users a little bit more freedom to take a look at the data that they want.
Okay, so it sounds like you have to do a lot of optimization up front to make sure that, especially if you are pulling in large data sets, that you're aggregating as much as you can and making design choices as to how to best get the user the information they need.
That's correct.
Is that okay? Can you talk a little bit how Jasper is used by the various teams at ITMI? Is there a particular report and how its design changed based on who's viewing it versus who's using it or what it's used for?
So we do have certain folders for our users that some reports are used by our clinical research coordinators, and we do have some reports that are used mainly for the lab. The lab will normally use, the reports for them are normally for quality control and for workload checking, see if they have enough people or they need more people down in the lab, or what times are best to have people down there to have more people. The CRCs, on the other hand, they use it for quality control of the actual samples, and they'll take a look, and they use it heavily for auditing to make certain that everything is coming in as it should, or we may need to recollect this one, but they use it to check the samples themselves, whereas, as I said, the lab uses it to check their quality and their workload.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think how each department or how each team uses Jasper, I think is really interesting. One of the things that I don't know if you mentioned directly, but our clinical research team, they'll often use Jasper for like quality checks, right? Like something they could use Nautilus for, like they can go in and see that the sample was processed and stored. They could do that through Nautilus, but they do that through Jasper. Well, what are some of the challenges with that?
I actually, I feel like them using Jasper makes it easier. I mean, they don't get to see all of the data. We don't have fields in there to show who accessioned it, or we don't. There's also times when they may want to see the child aliquots, but most often they're more worried about the actual collection event itself, which is the sample for us in Nautilus, and they're more concerned about, you know, the collection devices. But they, I just lost my thought. I apologize.
It's okay. So I think what you're getting at is that at the clinical research level, what they are focused on is making sure that what was sent down to the lab was actually what was received on lab, and there wasn't a problem. I know that there was a case a while back where there was a urine cup that was sent through our tube system, and the cap wasn't on all the way, and urine just spilled everywhere, and they had to send for another one, and that's how they view a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. So I remember the thought now. It's Jasper helps them to be able to see all the information that they're asking for at one point, instead of them having to go into Nautilus and look at each sample individually. So it gives them that ability to see bulk data versus having to spend the time to, you know, go back and forth to find these actual samples. And they actually, so they use Jasper to verify their information from REDCap as well. So they'll say, they'll put information into REDCap about a sample, and then they'll go and check the database. Check the database through Jasper to see if it actually did get taken care of like it was supposed to. So they'll use it for not just quality control, but as I said, I think that's part of their auditing process. But I've heard them talk often about how they use Jasper to verify what's in REDCap and Nautilus between the two.
Gotcha. Okay. Now you spoke a little bit about the time of day report that the lab asked for a while back. I can't remember exactly where you were in the development process when you arrived here at ICMI. Can you talk a little bit about that, like what it does, what it's for, how it's being used?
Do you mean the one where they see how many samples or collections that they do within each hour, or do you mean the one that shows the samples that are collected outside of their time frame?
Well, let's start with the first one. So just every hour, how many samples are being processed?
So I actually did not work on this one. This one was one that was already there. But it aggregates based off of the hour itself, and it'll show a total amount of aliquots that have been accessioned throughout the day. But it just breaks it down by hour, and you can actually see, it's actually interesting because you'll see a hike around noontime. We'll have a whole bunch of samples come in, but we'll also have a whole bunch of samples in the morning too. So it allows them to make certain that they've got enough people to handle the increased workflow at certain hours. And they noticed a trend of things coming in, you know, there's a lot of samples in the morning, and then there's a lot of samples in the noontime, and then it'll kind of like drop off a little bit at the end of the day. There are some outliers where we have several samples come in, but on average, it's helped them figure out when they need people there the most.
That sounds like that would be, really useful to determine where it's best to place people during the day. So, I mean, you had mentioned that samples seem to come really quickly near lunchtime. Maybe it's the people, everyone's trying to get out for lunch and trying to get everything all squared away before leaving for lunch. What are some of the metrics that you have seen get developed out of the report?
I know that they'll use Jasper in. We had one particular individual who would use Jasper, and what information she couldn't get out of Jasper, she actually had to go on foot to find out. But that she would take those reports and use it to justify, okay, we need these people, we need to hire more people, we need to be able to do this, we have increased workload, so we need people to be able to handle this. That's the most, that's the one that I've actually seen and noticed. Whereas the CRCs really use it for just quality checks and verifying that they actually have the samples as they're supposed to, and that they've been processed correctly.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of the limitation with Jasper has to do with the fact that it can't be, that it's difficult, or maybe not necessarily difficult to update from an IP standpoint, but there's enough of a resistance or friction that it's not an ideal situation.
Well, it's also not very pretty either. When you're just looking you're just basically getting a data dump. When you refine the query, they're basically just getting a data dump, and they have to sort through that data or look through that data. So it's hard to consume that much information when you don't have something pleasant or like fully pleasant to look at. Like I add color where I can, but I try to keep most of the reports as simple as possible, because it can take some time to develop them and get everything just right. Because each one of the elements that you create, they have to be perfectly positioned. And you'd be surprised where you do a color and somebody goes, no, I just don't like that color, change it. Okay.
Right.
But it's very much for simple reports, and when you're having to look at so much data and trying to consume that much data, there's no real quick way to look at that chart and go, oh, that's what that means. Especially when they're doing verification between their actual between different systems.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think that's really one of the limitations of Jasper, is that you're right. It doesn't look pretty. There's a lot of, I mean, you can spend the time to make the report look pretty, but if you want that, you have to live with the fact that it's going to take some time, and often these reports just need to, give you the data and then so you can run. We've been talking here with Rachel. Go ahead.
Sorry. That's mainly because by the time that they've asked you for the report, there's no simple, fast way to create a report with the pretty pictures. To be able to do that does take a lot more time and a lot more effort to do that. So most often when they're wanting these reports, they take the data. They basically take the data dump, and it gives them what they need. It gets the job done.
We've been talking here with Rachel Wilson, who's our lab informatics engineer here at the Inova Translational Medicine Institute. And we're talking about reporting, and Jasper is one of the tools that we use. And we're going to move on to Tableau. But if you guys have any questions, looks like we just had a question come in. How easy is it to export the report to Excel or CSV? Can the exported file format details be configured? And Rachel, I'll just send that to you.
Okay, I can see it.
Okay.
So with Jasper, it's actually already built in. So whenever you create the report, and publish it, they have the option to get it as a PDF, to get it as an image, or to get it as an Excel file, CSV, which they do separate the two of them. They also have Excel paginated. So they have several options to be able to export the report. Now, the biggest thing about exporting it is if you have a table, it makes it easier to export the report itself. But if you have like headers or anything, it will merge those columns together. And I've had to mess with the report itself, aside, to be able to get it to work just right, to have the columns in the right order and where they're supposed to be. But as for, the file format or the details to configure, I haven't really messed with any of that particular information. I haven't really seen anything about being able to change, whether or not they have access to send, to export it as a CSV or export it as this or only do this. That option seems to be prepackaged once you publish the report.
All right, there is a question here from Sean Walker. What was the reason you decided to use Jasper for reporting instead of Infomaker?
When I got here, Jasper was actually what we were already using, and I hadn't, Nautilus was something I'd never heard of until I started here, and they, right when I started, we had like a huge issue with one of the reports. The data didn't look correct, or they didn't like the way that it looked, or they thought the data was incorrect. So I went through a heck of a process to figure out what was going on. It was mainly waiting for other people to make decisions about it. But as I said, I hadn't heard of Nautilus or Infomaker or even Jasper until I started here. And Infomaker I didn't even know about for the longest time. Like I'd seen the word, but I didn't know that it was reporting services. And so I haven't really had a chance to, sit down and see if Infomaker is better than Jasper. I just know that it's Nautilus's reporting system.
I think also to complement that is that with Infomaker, at least from my limited, and I use that from the standpoint that my experience with it was primarily at our Boston conference, is that the Infomaker is a tool that can only be used within the Nautilus application. If I'm wrong about that, please feel free to correct me. So in order to use it, you have to have an account in Nautilus. So if you do that, it means that anyone that wants to have access to that data, you have to expose them to the application, which I'm sure a lot of people here can relate that Nautilus is not a pretty application and it can be a little bit clunky. And according to Sean, it can be used outside of Nautilus. That's good to know. But I think the overall effort, and I think the only reason why we never really hung on to it is that our organization as a whole was moving more towards Tableau anyway, and to transition from Jasper to Infomaker then to Tableau was going to be a little bit more work and effort than we were willing to put in. That's a very good question, Sean. Thanks for asking.
So one thing about Jasper real quick is thankfully the managing of the users, because the way that we use Jasper is we have it set up on a server, and they go to hit that server and they are able to get their information by running the reports there. But thankfully, one of the things that I do like about Jasper is that it's really easy. If there's somebody that wants access to it, as long as they have they're approved for it, you just go in, put in their information, put in their roles, and they're ready to go. Just give them their password, and they can change it as well. I've actually created a couple of how-tos to help them be able to change their password, because it doesn't automatically prompt them to do that. But user management is actually fairly simple with it too. So there is that's a good side about it. So it is free. It is it gives you what you need. You can create reports in it, and you can use stored procedures, or you can use SQL queries. You can use different databases, and it's good with user management, or there's little upkeep for users, for the managing users.
Good. Ricardo, your second question here, how is Jasper better than InfoMaker? If you would like, if Sean, if you're willing to speak to this, sounds like you have some experience with InfoMaker, but my guess is that you don't have experience with Jasper. That's kind of, I guess that's kind of where we really can't give you a good answer. I think I had just mentioned before that, you know, the use of InfoMaker within Nautilus might be a limitation for some. For us, you know, we wanted a web portal primarily. Also, when Nautilus was first introduced here at our organization, we had a lot of people who were off-site and could not VPN into the organization to be able to access the server or access Nautilus, the application, but they couldn't access the web server. And so that was a lot easier for us from a solution standpoint. And Sean, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you want to speak to this a little bit about your experience with InfoMaker, that'd be great. Okay, Sean's mic doesn't work, so he's going to provide his comments in the chat should he choose to do so. But these are really good questions. Please keep on asking. We're going to go ahead and move on to Tableau. Tableau is pretty much the new hotness. My guess is that everyone here has either heard it or has used it or known someone who's used it. It is spreading like wildfire. I think LinkedIn has named Tableau as one of these skills to learn to help people to understand the data that they have and take action on it. There is a public version, and it's free, as in it doesn't cost anything, but it's not open source. The caveat to that is that can only be saved online. So if you have like reports that are sensitive information, like that your competitors could use, or that could be valuable to somebody, just know that you're publishing it out in the open. The other limitation with the public version is that you can't directly connect to databases. The majority of the integrations you can do are primarily through things like Excel or text files, or in some cases Google Sheets. So there is some dynamicness to it, but not a whole bunch. There is an enterprise edition, but it can be kind of pricey because it's priced per user, not per like instance. So that's been a huge limitation for us. And one of the things that I've really been encouraging our product owner for Tableau is to figure out if the people that are named in the licenses are actually using the license. My guess is that the answer to that is probably no. Tableau is also insanely popular right now, and there's plenty of resources on how to do stuff in Tableau. Whether you'll actually figure it out, though, that's a whole other question. But it can be difficult to use for some technical people. And the reason I say that is the pattern that I've noticed is that if you give Tableau to somebody who's never touched who understands data, but never touched the SQL Server, or never touched Jasper or other BI tools, they usually can get Tableau a lot faster than people who are like database savvy and DBAs. I think primarily from the standpoint is that a lot of DBAs and technical people expect the application to work a certain way, and it doesn't. Whereas the people who never had that experience can do it very easily. I don't know if you share that same experience, Rachel, and I don't know if you can speak to that.
I feel like there might be some truth to it, but the danger there when for giving someone who knows the data but may not know the actual structure of the data is that they could join the tables incorrectly to the wrong IDs, and also there you run into different problems versus what kind of problems you'd have in Jasper. But the good thing about Tableau is that there are a lot of resources, so people can pick it up pretty fast, and it's actually quite fun to use. I know for what we do here, I was trying to make a data source that everybody could use, so that they wouldn't have to go in and figure out, okay, well, what does this do, and where's this tied to this, and where's this information I'm missing this. So that's the only issue that I've seen with Tableau. That's one of the few issues I've seen with Tableau is that unless you know the structure of the data, it can be tricky to get the information you're looking for.
Yeah, I think you raised a really good point about making sure that the joins are done correctly. If you're not familiar with the Nautilus Nautilus data set or even the overall database schema, it can be hard to even know or understand how some of the joins are made. I think one of the common ones that I've seen with new employees at start is they don't understand that the aliquot table has a link to the plate table. And they think it's the other way around, that plate has a link to aliquot. And it's really interesting that unless you have that knowledge and unless you're training someone in that knowledge, it can be quite tricky.
Yeah. I actually do really like Tableau though, because it makes it easy for you to make a good looking chart or report or dashboard. Now, the one thing about Tableau that I've noticed that's very different from, any other reporting services I've used is that Tableau is not just a report. If you take a look at just looking at the stuff that we had in Jasper and trying to move that stuff over into Tableau, Tableau's made to, if you use it correctly, it's made to answer more than one question about your data, and it allows you to delve deeper into it and see, what's behind, what's making up these numbers, and so it'll actually allow you to do some quality control on your data. So you have this this aliquot with this weird status. Why does it do that? And you can actually go back and find the sample that it's attached to and everything and all that type of information. So it's really good about being able to dig into the data that's behind. Now, you're only able to do that if you're not using a custom stored procedure or a custom query. If you try to use a custom query, that's where you run into issues because you can't see the data behind it. So they strongly recommend that you don't use stored procedures, that you connect straight to the raw data, because it allows the user to actually see what's making up these numbers for them. If they see like, well, there's 68 aliquots, there's not supposed to be that many, they can go see what's causing that number.
Yeah, I think you raised a good point, and this is where the skill of Tableau and the benefits of Tableau really come into play. Is that it's really good at boiling down the data down to the detail if you really wanted to, but it's also just as good at giving you that bird eye view, and you can do that, it sounds like, in the same report. Is that correct?
Yes. So think of the reports that get created in SSRS or that get created in Jasper. That's one report to answer one question. When you're making a Tableau dashboard, you're making several reports. Each sheet within Tableau is used as a separate report, and it allows you to look further into your data. So you could have it to where you click on this particular sample and it'll bring up the information behind it, into more detail, or it'll show you something else. Like you can have it do so many different things that, some of the other reporting services just don't have that ability.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it almost touches on something that you had just mentioned, which was that you were in the process of moving reports from Jasper into Tableau. Can you discuss that project a little bit?
So what I'm having to do with this particular project is look at each one of the reports within Jasper and find out, go to the person who wanted it if they're available, and see if, what's the question that this answered. Okay, well, what other questions do you have about this data? Because as I said, with these particular charts in Jasper and moving them to Tableau, they're only answering one question, whereas there could be more questions or more information. What is this report doing for you or isn't doing for you? Or what would you, what are the steps that you have to take to verify that all of this information is correct? And most often it's like, well, I have to go here and then here, and I'm looking at 3 reports to do this. And with Tableau, you don't have to do that because they're all on one screen and they can correlate to each other. So it's really good with that.
So let me ask you kind of like the corollary question. Are there reports that would be better done in Jasper and not in Tableau? Is there a situation that would be that way?
I can imagine that there would be, but at this point, I'm not really certain, because there's normally with each question that I get, like it's more along the lines of that they had this question and that gave them some of the information and they were able to go on from there. But they use with the using of like combinations of reports, it makes it Tableau will make it easier for them to not have to jump from screen to screen to look at the different reports. I would say that the hourly one would probably be okay for it to be a single report in Jasper, but I actually was looking at some of the dashboards that people have made, and there's a call center one that looks really nice and gives you a breakdown and gives you a good visual, bird's eye view of what's happening within that call center, and that is something that I would really, really like to create for our lab to let them to be able to see, get that full view in color and something that attracts them to it so that they can see it and go, wow, that's interesting.
Well, it's actually really funny that you say it that way, because there was something that you said about Tableau that you did not say about Jasper, that you said that Tableau is actually fun to work with. So I'm guessing that's not true for Jasper.
No, it's not. It's not as fun as Tableau to work with. Just to see the different, transformations of things that you can do, you have such a large variety of things that you can do within Tableau, whereas Jasper is a lot, stricter in what you can do in it, or at least what I've been able to do is it. There's still some things in there that I'm not really certain, there's still some things in it that I have not used because the occasion didn't call for it and it's not well represented within the actual software itself that, this could be something cool to use. Whereas with Tableau, everything's flashy and new.
Right. Let's go ahead and get to Ricardo's question here. He asked, have you had the need to create pre-organized data, material of views in Oracle?
We have some views that we've materialized views. I'm not familiar with that particular phrase. We don't normally have to create new tables or new views to be able to use our data because we're able to get the information that we need based off of the different joins and all that we have. Now, there are some of the queries that I've had to write that have had subqueries within them to get that information, and some of them can get really long.
Wow.
But overall, it's better just to get the information straight from. Now, I think that could be considered part of your question when it comes to Jasper versus Jasper and wanting to get aggregated data. You do that on the query portion. You don't do that. You don't normally do that within Jasper itself. Whereas Tableau, you get all the raw data and it will aggregate it however you wish to aggregate it. Which can present.
And Ricardo, I don't know if this answers your question. I know that sometimes there's a theory in data analytics where do you process the data? Is it better to do it on the server or do it on the fly or do it at the desk? And I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, is how much do you do on the server? Is that kind of what you're asking about? If you could write an answer in the chat, that'd be great, just so that we're making sure that we're answering the correct question. Database visualization. Yeah. So it sounds like we're kind of on that same page. I would say both Jasper and Tableau. I know on our data data warehouse side. So a lot of our Nautilus data gets sucked in to a data warehouse or data lake. If I'm being perfectly honest, I'm not sure what the difference between the two are. But in this area, what what some of our informatics people, not anyone on my team, just because they know better, other people in our informatics team will often do is they'll create a view or some sort of stored procedure or something like that that will then present the data to either Tableau or some other external reporting tool. The most common one is Tableau, but some people want the raw, like CSV, Excel file so that they can then do their own transformation at their desk. And so I think more often than not, that's done primarily to resolve keys. So if you have like a foreign key on the database and that's not of any use to someone that's looking at the data, you want to convert that to what it actually is. And that transformation can be done right on the database and then sent out. On Tableau, just like Rachel said, it's preferable on Tableau, and it's actually quite faster if you don't do all that work upfront. Tableau is smart enough to figure out how to best run the query to get you the data that you want, and it's run on the fly. And maybe Rachel, she's our expert here. So why don't you speak to that a little bit?
So I will say that there can be some challenges if you have a lot of data within your database. They recommend creating an extract. Now, the problem with creating an extract is that, well, you won't, if you do it the way that they want you to, you don't have all of the data with it. Now, whatever data you do have will show up in the behind the scenes, but if you have users like our users, they want all of the data. They want it from the beginning of time. So it can be a little bit for it to actually do the initial load when they're going into the workbook. But once they get into the workbook, once it's loaded, that's normally pretty good and pretty fast to bring up the information, which is something that I've really appreciated, because sometimes with the Jasper reports, they'll just sit there and spin.
Yeah, I think there's actually a good, this is actually one of the primary reasons why we're moving away from Jasper and into Tableau, is that one, I think probably one of the biggest reasons is that it's becoming very popular use, and two, it's actually very nice to look at. If you guys are interested in Tableau, there are a number of different resources available. The one that we utilize primarily is what's called Makeover Monday, where they give out a free data set every week and challenge you to make the data look really nice. And it's a good exercise for people to do. Looks like we have another question here from Ricardo. How often are Tableau extracts refreshed? Our main need for Oracle views and material views is performance for large data sets. Rachel, I don't know if you can speak to that.
You can do the same thing with with refreshing the way that you refresh overnight. I believe you could set up something to do the same thing with Tableau so that your extracts could be refreshed. But normally they're refreshed on demand if they're needed. Because most of our stuff, we actually don't use extracts all that much. We just go right into the database.
Yeah, I think it often depends on, one, what your database administrator is willing to let you do, and two, overall, like how accurate do you need the data to be? And so this is often a question that we ask anytime that we're asked for a new report, is can you live with data that's at least a day old? So our data warehouse gets updated nightly. And so if they're okay, if they just need, hey, we need to be able to publish a paper and tell them how many samples that we have, that's a very good use of day-old data. There's no harm in it. But if they need, hey, I need to know whether the urine sample I sent you today is in the database, that's where Tableau, Tableau can do it if it's set up correctly, but it's that's where you have to make that choice of, if you get it on demand, it might not be as fast.
When we do have, like one of the reports that we use with Jasper, it's one that would be best to be from live data, because there's certain samples that, they want to know immediately, was there enough to actually do anything and do any accessioning with, and if there's not, okay, we need to go back and get another sample from somebody because they have a certain allotted amount of samples that they can take, and once they hit that number, they can't take any more. But if they have a sample that didn't go through, they need to know that immediately so they can plan appropriately. So being able to have that kind of information live would make things a lot easier for them, and that's one of the reasons why they have that report within Jasper, because instead of coming from the data warehouse where most of our reports are coming from for Tableau, that one actually hits the Nautilus database. So as soon as the information gets into Nautilus, they can have it right there.
That's a good explanation, and that's a great question, Ricardo. It sounds like you have some challenges with your data and making sure that people get access to it, and sounds like it's a very common problem that a lot of people have. We'll go ahead and continue on with our conversation here with Rachel. We're talking here with Rachel Wilson, who is our lab informatics engineer here at Inova, and she helps with the reporting and the overall administration of Nautilus as well. We've moved to talking about Tableau. We were talking about Jasper, and yeah, I think that there are some great things about Tableau that Rachel has mentioned and I had mentioned, and it seems like that's the direction that Jasper's coming. Now, before Rachel started here at Inova, one of the exercises that I did was evaluating actually the professional version of Jasper. And it seems like from that standpoint, that the data set or the feature set between the two are very, very similar. What ultimately made the choice for us is that because the number of users that we have was low enough that actually professional Tableau was a better buy than Jasper, which really confused our sales rep over at Jasper, but they understood where we were coming from. Our overall goal here in informatics is to make the data as democratized and as easy to access as possible. And we really try to do that by using tools like Tableau to accomplish that goal. Because in my view, the easier it is for our end users to transform the data, the better they can make decisions without us having to be involved. Are there any final thoughts that you have, Rachel, between these two or other analytical tools that you've used?
From the ones that I have used, like I said, Tableau is one of the better, or is the one that I prefer over the others that I've used. It does take a little bit of startup to be able to use some of the features that it has and to figure out just how it works. But overall, it's fun to work with. It's not always easy to work with, but people like pretty pictures, and if you can make it interactive and if you can, give your users what they want, plus making it look nice, they're going to be even happier with you. And Tableau does satisfy that need. Now, if you just need some information, you just don't want to have to shell out the money for it, Jasper is a good alternative to that, to be able to get your information out there. And I agree that we want our information available to our users, because I am very much a big advocate for cleaning data and making certain that the data is correct and as it needs to be. Now, if your users are not able to see the data that they're putting into the database, they have no idea if it's correct. And you might think it's correct, but then there's an error in it. And so the ability to be able to see your data is what's really important, because if you only store your data and never use it for anything, what good is that data? What is the integrity of it? What's the quality of it? Is it even usable? So the big thing is being able to see your data and put it in such a way that your users can see it too.
That's very well put. Thank you very much, Rachel, for that input. Yeah, I think it's really interesting where we are just as a society in terms of data and overall analytics. A lot of people describe that this is the information age, and I think that's very true. But what's happening is that we have so much data that we don't know what to do with it, and that's where a lot of organizations, including ours, has problems. Is that we want to make decisions off this data. Do we have enough people? Do we not have enough people? Where are the gaps? Where are the pain points? And unfortunately, just staring at a database doesn't do that. And a lot of tools like Jasper and Tableau have really come into the foray to help people to do that. Thank you guys very much for joining us here today. I'm not going to lie, I am actually completely out of ideas. So if you guys have any topics that you guys would like us to present upon, more than happy to take your questions or your topics and run with them. If you would like to present, please also let me know. You can do that by either scanning the barcode that you see on the screen or by filling out the survey that I'm going to hopefully copy and paste into the chat box here for people to fill out. Like I said, this topic was generated due to feedback that we received. A number of people were curious about how it is that we do reporting and how others do reporting. And you know, if other organizations want to repeat this exact same presentation in the next month, I'm more than happy to do that, because I think part of I think what's made it a little bit hard for me is that the people that have come to this meetup have only really seen it from our side, from the ITMI side. And I hate to break it to you, but we're not perfect. There are a lot of mistakes that we've made. There are a lot of mistakes that we continue to make. And it would be great to hear other success stories and other pain points, just to see, you know, where other people are at, so that you, at the very least, that we know that we're not alone, and other people can help figure that out and make Nautilus a little bit better for your organization. Again, my name is Michael So. We're joined by Rachel Wilson, who works with me on our team to administer Nautilus. Again, thank you guys very much for joining us. Please fill out the feedback survey. We'll be sending out an email very shortly after this for your feedback, and that really does help us to know whether these are helpful or not. Thank you guys for joining. Rachel and I will stay behind for a few minutes to answer any ancillary questions. We'll also open up the line for everybody, so that if you guys want to speak to us directly, that we can, that you guys can do so. Other than that, this meetup is pretty much done. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you guys in June, probably about the 3rd or 4th week of June. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We might not have any questions, Rachel, so we'll just stay on for another 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you, Sean, for joining us yet again. And so, yeah, it's always great to see you. I still remember going out to dinner with you back in Boston. So hopefully if they do another presentation, we can do it again.
I will say that if you guys come across anything within Nautilus that you're like, well, this is neat, or that's interesting, that might be an idea to do for a presentation, because I know that I've been racking my mind going, what can I do for a presentation, and not coming up with anything. And it's just in those moments when you're working with Nautilus that you might find, well, that was weird, or, huh, that's interesting. And then that's something you can actually do a presentation on. So if you come across anything like weird little quirks that might be interesting, we'd love to hear them.
Not only that, I would say even things that are like, man, I wish Nautilus did this, and you guys found like a really roundabout way to meet a requirement. I mean, that too is also really interesting to know, because odds are you're probably not the only one that's done it that way. Last presentation, I presented on, actually no, back in Boston, I presented on something called universal accessioning. And we found out a lot from people about some of the things that we were doing that might not be the best way to do it. And it's something that we take into account. And so, but it was really interesting because what we presented on was to talk about how to accession or how to create new devices and new studies. And it used to take us 3-4 months to go from dev to production. But now it's so well done that we can actually release directly to production. Now, we don't do it, but we can if we really needed to. Everything is codified, everything is audited, everything is secured, but the process is in place such that it's so reliable that you can do it directly in production. And that was one of the things that we really wanted people to see. Sean, I get that there are definitely several weird quirks. If you want to send us what your quirks are, more than happy to either present on them or give you presenter and have you present on it the next time that we do it. Like I said, I am out of ideas. The rest of my ideas are pretty much just about how really difficult Nautilus is to work with. But outside of that, yeah, it's hard. Yes, Sean, please do let us know if you come up with something. All right, we're going to go ahead and close things down here. I think the last few people have maybe walked away from the desk or are here in this room with me in the conference room. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you guys in July. Thanks again, Rachel, for your time and for your thoughts.
Thank you. Appreciate it.